Whispers of a discovery buried beneath the sands of Iraq have terrified even the bravest archaeologists. Radar scans revealed structures matching the epic descriptions of Gilgamesh's final resting place, yet no one dares break the seal. Why? Because what lies inside is rumored to defy history, science, and even human understanding. Could this be the tomb of a king who was said to be part man, part god? Or is it something even more dangerous? Tonight, we'll uncover why this mystery has left experts pale with fear: the tomb beneath Uruk. In the early 2000s, a discovery shook the archaeological world, though most of the details never made it past whispers, scattered reports, and hushed discussions among researchers. In 2003, a German-led team operating near the ruins of ancient Uruk conducted a series of scans that would ignite one of the most enduring mysteries of modern archaeology. Led by Dr. Jörg Fassbinder, the group deployed ground-penetrating radar and magnetometers, hoping to uncover remnants of Sumerian civilization buried beneath the desert sands. What they found was nothing short of extraordinary. The instruments revealed shapes, lines, and voids beneath the surface that suggested more than simple geology. They suggested architecture, corridors, chambers, and even the traces of canal-like structures. To the astonishment of the team, these features bore a striking resemblance to passages described in Mesopotamian texts. A vast complex linked to the final resting place of Gilgamesh, the legendary king of Uruk. The scans suggested something massive, roughly the size of a football field, and the layout echoed the descriptions of structures surrounding Gilgamesh's burial. The Epic of Gilgamesh, the oldest surviving piece of literature known to mankind, describes his life, his quest for immortality, and ultimately his burial beneath the river. For centuries, historians assumed this phrasing was poetic, not literal. But the radar results suggested otherwise. The Sumerians wrote that Gilgamesh was interred beneath or near the Euphrates River itself, his tomb hidden by water and sediment. Over thousands of years, the Euphrates has shifted its course multiple times, cutting new channels and abandoning old ones. The site in question, near modern-day Warqa in southern Iraq, lay along one of these ancient channels. In other words, it matched the ancient record in a way that was impossible to ignore. For the first time, there was real evidence that the king, who has long been thought of more as legend than man, might actually have had a tomb. If this continued to prove true, it would be one of the greatest archaeological discoveries in history, such as finding the resting place of King Tut or the unearthing of Troy. It would prove that the man described as two-thirds god and one-third human was not merely a subject of myth, but was, indeed, a historical ruler somewhere in the real world, and left behind a burial place not unworthy of his epic legacy. But notwithstanding the largeness of the discovery, there was no excavation that followed. The German team simply handed their data to local Iraqi authorities, and that was how it all seemed to disappear. The official justification for this was timing. 2003, the year when Iraq went to war, and all in the region made it impossible to do more excavation work. From then onward, the country fell to chaos, and all foreign teams hustled out for their safety. But to those versed in the story, that was only part of the truth. It was reason enough to give anybody a raised eyebrow. No official report, no peer-reviewed paper, no images released. How could one of the most promising discoveries in modern history simply be abandoned? Why was there no academic record beyond interviews with Fassbinder himself? To skeptics, the absence of transparency suggested something else at work: bureaucracy, secrecy, or even fear. In archaeology, discoveries are normally documented, archived, and studied, even if excavation cannot begin immediately. In this case, all that remained were rumors and the initial statements of the team leader. As months turned into years, speculation flourished. Some suggested that Iraqi officials, overwhelmed by the invasion and looting of cultural sites across the country, deliberately sealed away the information to prevent further losses. Others believed that the find was simply too controversial, too destabilizing to the accepted historical record, to risk opening to the public. If a legendary king's tomb truly lay beneath Uruk, then what else from the ancient Sumerian texts might also prove true? But whispers soon spread that fear wasn't the only reason the site was abandoned. And those whispers, they spoke of something ancient, something powerful, and something cursed. Legends of a curse and whispers of war. Local folklore, unexplained. Illnesses and conspiracy theories surrounding U.S. military involvement deepen the mystery and fear. For as long as civilizations have risen and fallen, the act of burial has been steeped in ritual, reverence, and, yes, sometimes fear. But the fear surrounding Gilgamesh's potential tomb isn't just a modern phenomenon, it's woven into the very fabric of Mesopotamian belief. Think Egyptian curses are spooky? The ancient Sumerians and Babylonians had their own ways of protecting their dead, methods steeped in incantations and divine retribution. Instead of explicitly writing out curses on tomb walls like their Egyptian counterparts, the Mesopotamians favored spells and rituals. These spells, meticulously recorded on clay tablets, weren't just pretty words. They invoked the wrath of the gods themselves, promising dire consequences for anyone who dared disturb the eternal rest of a king. And we're not talking about a slap on the wrist. These texts warned of disease, madness, and a divine anger that could ripple outwards, affecting not just the individual, but their entire community. Now imagine the kind of protection afforded to someone like Gilgamesh. Not just a king, but a demigod, a figure straddling the line between the mortal and divine. The barriers surrounding his tomb wouldn't just be physical. They'd be spiritual, powerful, and potentially terrifying. And that's where the whispers begin. Almost immediately after the German team packed up their equipment and left Uruk, stories started circulating amongst the local population. Villagers, shepherds, those who lived and breathed the desert air began to report strange occurrences around the suspected tomb site. They spoke of an unusual energy emanating from the land. Their animals, normally docile, refused to cross certain areas. Sheep scattered in terror, dogs howled relentlessly at night, and even the birds seemed to avoid flying overhead. These weren't isolated incidents. These were recurring patterns, building into a collective unease, a shared understanding that something beneath the sand was not meant to be awakened. Then came the truly unsettling stories, the accounts of people inexplicably falling ill after venturing too close. One particularly chilling tale, passed down through hushed voices amongst researchers, tells of a small group of laborers who were setting up equipment near the site. Within days, they were reportedly afflicted with severe nausea, debilitating, fevers, and episodes of violent dizziness. One man, according to the whispers, tragically died within 2 weeks. Now let's be clear, there was never any official confirmation. Perhaps the illnesses were due to contaminated water or heat stroke or some other environmental factor. But to the locals, the explanation was far simpler, far more terrifying. They had trespassed on forbidden ground, and the tomb was exacting its price. As these stories spread, the idea of a curse began to take a more concrete form. Rumors emerged, unverified, mind you, but persistent, of cuneiform inscriptions discovered on walls or artifacts associated with the site. These writings allegedly contained dire warnings, speaking of eternal guardians and a vessel not to be broken until the stars align once more. Dramatic, yes, even mythical sounding. But this kind of language isn't uncommon in Mesopotamian funerary texts. Priests and scribes often used celestial metaphors to describe the delicate balance between gods, mortals, and the afterlife. Even fragments of such pronouncements from Gilgamesh's tomb would suffice to sustain within man both dread and wonder. Online legends then took the stage. Comparisons to the tomb of Tutankhamun in Egypt, with its infamous Curse of the Pharaohs, started to proliferate. Articles and videos drew parallels between the alleged sudden deaths of those who entered Tutankhamun's tomb, deaths that some attributed to mold spores and bacteria, and the potential dangers lurking within Gilgamesh's resting place. The Curse of Gilgamesh, fueled not by concrete evidence but by unexplained events, local folklore, and humankind's innate fear of the unknown, captured the world's imagination. Even the most skeptical, seasoned researchers had to acknowledge the power of these tales. Archaeologists may not openly admit to believing in curses, but they understand the gravity of local beliefs. Ignoring them could lead to a loss of cooperation, a breakdown in trust, even a threat to their safety. A site shunned by the local population sends a powerful message, a signal that transcends mere superstition. It becomes a practical reason to pause, to reconsider, and sometimes to walk away altogether. And so the tomb of Gilgamesh remained untouched, not because anyone could definitively prove the existence of a curse, but because too many believed it might be real. Yet even as the atmosphere of fear thickened, another explanation began to surface, one that had nothing to do with vengeful spirits or ancient incantations, and everything to do with modern conflict. War, secrecy, and lost access added another chilling layer to the mystery. The timing, as they say, couldn't have been worse. In early 2003, just as whispers of the Uruk scans started to reach the wider archaeological community, the Iraq War erupted. The German-led team that had detected the subterranean shapes beneath the sands of Uruk had no choice but to suspend their operations. Foreign nationals fled the country for their own safety, research was halted, and permits were revoked. What could have been the dawn of a historical excavation instead became the start of an enduring mystery. The scans were real, the data existed, but the chance to confirm them vanished almost overnight. As the war raged, the site faded from official records, but it didn't disappear from memory. The void of information quickly became fertile ground for speculation. U.S. military forces soon occupied southern Iraq, and reports circulated that checkpoints were being strategically placed near areas of known archaeological significance. To many, this was not a coincidence. Rumors started swirling that American forces had not only secured the Uruk site, but had taken control of whatever lay hidden beneath it. Whispers of sealed trucks, heavily guarded convoys, and the clandestine, nighttime removal of artifacts ignited suspicion. Some even claimed that the tomb had been looted under the watchful eye of the military, its precious contents spirited away before any archaeologist could ever lay eyes on them. Theories flourished online, especially in the mid-2000s, as conspiracy forums began to amplify fragmented accounts and unverified claims. Some argued that the U.S. invasion had less to do with weapons of mass destruction and more to do with the clandestine pursuit of ancient knowledge or technology. Gilgamesh's name, once confined to epic poetry and academic textbooks, became a lightning rod for theories involving hidden power, immortality, and lost civilizations. Even the mainstream media gave brief attention to the story. Outlets like the BBC and Al Jazeera reported on the discovery in passing, but the coverage quickly faded. To those who were already suspicious, this silence seemed deliberate, a calculated attempt to bury the truth. Fueling these suspicions further was a very real, very tragic event, the looting of Iraq's National Museum in Baghdad. In the chaos of the invasion, thousands of priceless Mesopotamian artifacts vanished, statues, tablets, and jewelry from the very cradle of civilization itself. While some of these items were later recovered, many remain missing, swallowed up by the black market. Among them was one of the most important relics connected to Gilgamesh, the Gilgamesh Dream Tablet, a 3,500-year-old cuneiform piece containing passages from the epic. The fact that the tablet later resurfaced in the hands of private collectors, eventually ending up in the United States before being seized by federal authorities and returned to Iraq in 2021, only served to confirm that looting had taken place, and to amplify demands that any stolen treasures from Uruk also be returned. For many, the pattern was clear. The possible tomb of the most famous king in Mesopotamian history had been discovered. A war had broken out, and priceless artifacts had vanished from sight. Is it any wonder that suspicion thrived? To outsiders, history wasn't just lost. It was shrouded in a deliberate veil of secrecy. Beneath this whirlwind of speculation, however, lay a simple, undeniable fact. No archaeologists returned to the site after the initial scans. Whether that was due to military intervention, the i.e. threat of looting, or the fear of what might be found, the silence remained deafening. The war robbed Iraq of stability and slammed the door shut on what might have been one of archaeology's greatest discoveries. To this day, it remains unexplored, guarded not only by political borders but also by a thick fog of suspicion and unanswered questions. But beyond the realm of military intrigue and political conspiracies, archaeologists themselves had practical and unsettling reasons for staying away. Reasons that went beyond curses and conspiracies. Reasons that spoke to the very nature of archaeological work itself. Even without rumors of curses or whispers of military intervention, the prospect of excavating Gilgamesh's alleged tomb is, well, let's just say it's not like popping down to the local park with a shovel. Archaeology, despite the Indiana Jones image, is rarely about daring escapes and golden idols. It's a meticulous, painstaking process that demands stability, security, serious funding, and a whole lot of international cooperation. And, let's be honest, southern Iraq isn't exactly known for any of those things these days. The site, near the ruins of ancient Uruk, lies in a region that's been rocked by political instability for decades. Armed conflict, tribal tensions, fragile infrastructure. It all adds up to a logistical nightmare. Even routine archaeological projects are nearly impossible to sustain, let alone something on the scale of potentially uncovering the tomb of a legendary king. For foreign researchers, just getting teams, equipment, and specialists into the area requires armed escorts, clearance from multiple authorities, and extensive contingency planning. And that's before you even start digging. Let's just say not many universities or institutions are willing to accept that level of risk, no matter how tantalizing the reward might be. Then there are the environmental challenges. Southern Iraq is notorious for its unforgiving conditions. We're talking blistering heat, violent dust storms that can choke you in minutes, and seasonal floods that can turn a desert into a swamp overnight. Electronic instruments, the very tools archaeologists rely on, like ground-penetrating radar and magnetometers, can malfunction under these conditions, making reliable data collection a real challenge. Even if you did manage to start excavating, the shifting sands and unstable ground could threaten not only delicate artifacts, but more importantly, the safety of the archaeologists themselves. What looks on paper like a thrilling adventure into the past could quickly turn into a logistical disaster, and a potentially deadly one at that. But let's say, for the sake of argument, that you somehow overcome all those practical hurdles. You've got the permits, the security, the funding, the climate-controlled tents. You're ready to dig. Then you hit the next wall, uncertainty. Remember that German team's scans from 2003? They suggested the presence of geometric structures consistent with canals, corridors, and chambers, but no one has actually seen them with their own eyes. Remote sensing is powerful, sure, but it's not perfect. Anomalies underground can look like walls, but sometimes they turn out to be just natural rock formations or layers of sediment that shifted over time. So, you're asking an institution to gamble its reputation and the resources of its donors on what are essentially ambiguous radar readings. That's a risk very few are willing to take. Archaeologists, at their core, are scientists. They're trained to value verifiable evidence, to be skeptical of unproven claims, and to proceed with caution. They're wary of chasing leads that could turn out to be nothing more than wishful thinking. The academic world has seen plenty of promising discoveries that turned out to be embarrassing misinterpretations or outright hoaxes, and a high-profile failure at Uruk, a failed dig, a tomb that turns out to be nothing but a sand-filled pit. It wouldn't just damage reputations, it could strain diplomatic ties in a region already incredibly sensitive to foreign involvement. Nobody wants to be that team. And then, perhaps the biggest hesitation of all, preservation. Let's say you actually do find the tomb and you manage to get inside. Think of all that's at stake. Opening a sealed chamber after thousands of years is not like prying open a dusty old chest in your attic. The moment air, moisture, or light enters, ancient materials can begin to disintegrate. Papyrus scrolls can crumble to dust within hours. Wooden coffins can warp and crack. Even skeletal remains can decompose at an accelerated rate. Climate-controlled chambers, specialized conservation teams, and months, if not years, of preparation are absolutely essential before a site of this magnitude can even be safely entered, let alone excavated. To rush headfirst into Gilgamesh's tomb, if it truly exists, could mean destroying the very evidence that would prove its authenticity. For many archaeologists, that's the ultimate nightmare. The fear isn't of curses or conspiracies, but of irreparable loss. Better to wait, to plan, to proceed with the utmost care than to destroy forever what may be the greatest archaeological find of all time. These layers of very real, very practical hesitation are why the site has remained untouched for nearly 2 decades. The risks are immense, the uncertainties overwhelming, and the consequences of error potentially devastating. And yet, despite all these valid concerns, some claim the story doesn't end there. That behind the scenes, whispers circulate that a secret team pushed past these hesitations, that they dared to enter the forbidden chamber, and that what they found inside was enough to terrify even the most hardened researchers. Yes, you heard right. According to whispers in the archaeological community, a secret team already entered the chamber, and what they found terrified them. Among the most chilling claims surrounding the Uruk discovery are the whispered testimonies of those who say the tomb was not just detected beneath the sands, but briefly entered. According to these alleged insiders, sometime in the mid-2000s, a small group of contractors and local workers were tasked with probing deeper into the site. Their reports, of course, have never appeared in any official record, and yet the stories continue to circulate in hushed tones across academic backchannels and, you guessed it, conspiracy forums alike. These accounts describe a perilous descent into a sealed chamber where the team discovered a massive stone sarcophagus resting at the center. And here's where it gets really interesting. The walls around the sarcophagus, they claimed, were carved with cuneiform inscriptions, not just simple records of burial, but ominous invocations. The texts spoke of eternal guardians, of powers that would not forgive trespass, and of a vessel never meant to be disturbed until the stars themselves returned to their rightful positions. For some, the word vessel referred to the sarcophagus itself. For others, it hinted at something far stranger, something more than just a body laid to rest. Whatever its meaning, the message was crystal clear. This place was sealed for a reason. But the strangeness apparently didn't stop at the inscriptions. Reports circulated of truly inexplicable phenomena inside the chamber. One account claimed that the sarcophagus emitted a low, constant vibration, a hum that could be felt through the stone floor. Another described how all electrical equipment malfunctioned almost immediately upon entering. Batteries drained without explanation. Instruments refused to calibrate. Compasses spun erratically, as though caught in a magnetic storm. Some even said that a strong field of energy emanated from the walls themselves, invisible, yet undeniably present. To the scientifically minded, these details suggest anomalies that deserved further investigation. To those inclined to fear, well, they suggested something far more otherworldly. Perhaps the most extraordinary claim came from an alleged translator who worked briefly with photographs of the inscriptions. According to his testimony, the writing described Gilgamesh not merely as a king, but as a giant preserved by divine breath. The text spoke of a heart that does not decay, and a body suspended in a state between life and death. In other words, if these accounts are even remotely true, the tomb may not hold a skeleton turned to dust, but something unnervingly intact, and that's the possibility that electrifies some and terrifies others. Imagine for a moment the implications. The physical remains of a man described in the world's oldest literature, preserved in a condition that defies time. Some might suggest advanced embalming techniques lost to history. Others whisper of influences, not entirely human. Whatever the case, such a discovery would rewrite not only Mesopotamian history, but the very boundaries of what we believe is possible. But what about the team sent to retrieve these treasures? The alleged aftermath of the chamber's breach only adds to the unease. Workers reportedly fell ill soon after their entry, suffering from fever, nausea, and unexplained weakness. At least one man, the stories claim, died within weeks. Two of the individuals involved supposedly abandoned archaeology altogether, citing the experience as spiritually or psychologically unbearable. Remember, though, no documents, no photographs, and no official statements have ever confirmed these events. But the consistency of the rumors, shared quietly across years, has given them a chilling weight. For mainstream historians, such tales are, of course, dismissed as exaggerations or outright fabrications. Without any concrete evidence, they remain firmly in the realm of speculation. And yet, even as scholars caution against jumping to conclusions, the sheer persistence of these accounts simply cannot be ignored. They've become part of the mythology surrounding Gilgamesh's tomb, inseparable from the very facts that first sparked interest in it. But again, are these myths true? Only one thing remains. The silence continues.